Welcome to the Breakpoint Show. I am Gill Gross, joined by Alex Gruskin. This is the only podcast completely dedicated to breaking down each and every episode of the no longer new tennis docu-series on Netflix called Breakpoint. For all of our new fans who just discovered us over the course of a thrilling 2023 Roland Garros, you can go back and watch our first 5 episodes. You can also watch our interview with Taylor Fritz. You can watch our interview with Brian Koppelman. And you could even watch our interview with my friend Joe Abatanta. I don't know why you would do such a thing like that, but you could. It's out there if you'd like. Episode 6 has arrived, Alex. I want to start here before we get into the episode. The first batch, right? It dropped at the start of the Australian Open, right? Like those things happened simultaneously. Was this our first adjustment here where they're like, okay, let's not release these episodes as a major tournament is starting? And how about 2 weeks before Wimbledon?
Yeah, I do like that the off season between parts 1 and 2 of Breakpoint was longer than the off season of the actual tennis calendar. I do think they made some tactical adjustments, and I'm sure we'll talk about them throughout the course of these next 5 episodes. It's clear that they made the most of their additional 5-6 months, specifically with episodes 6 and 7. In my opinion, you could just tell there were storylines or things they didn't explore in the first 5 episodes that they certainly did in episode 6, as we'll talk about today, that in my opinion, made this the best episode of the series to date. But why did they choose this moment to drop part 6 through 10? I'm sure the Netflix algorithm had a specific reason as to why, and we'll never know the exact nuances of that answer. I do think it was to the benefit of the show because A, it allowed the first 5 episodes to breathe, and B, not to beat this drum, but they made changes, needed changes, and we'll explore them today.
Yeah, so I agree with all of that. I just thought the first batch of episodes, there was actually obviously more hype because it was something new and something highly anticipated. It got buried a little bit with the Australian Open. It was overload. And look, I'm not trying to, I know we can be in our own bubble here. And I think you and I originally were just like, oh, this is a lot all at once. But I actually think getting away from that, like nobody cares about our workload or our sleep schedule, right? Getting away from that, I actually think this just was refreshing. It made a lot more sense that, okay, yes, the hype has died down. It's no longer new. But do you know what has really helped here? The fact that there's no like massive tennis event that is taking away and sucking oxygen from the release of these Breakpoint episodes. So I don't want to beat this drum to death, but that was my feeling on it.
I have one more follow-up and then we can move on. Tennis overload is a perfect way of framing it because A, it's the start of a new year. And so much is happening at the start of a new year for every human being. Even if in the school calendar here in the States it's halfway through, it's the flipping to a new year. And whether it's work-related, whatever it is, obviously start of a new sporting season, certainly as a tennis fan, it was a lot to process, the start of the tennis season. You have the ending of football. You have college football coming to its conclusion, which I know doesn't matter much to Syracuse, but matters to a lot of the country. You have other things. Just, again, it was a confluence of events. Plus, you had full swing. You had another F1 series being released as well. Just immediate things for Breakpoint to not be allowed to breathe on its own. Things that it had to immediately be compared to. And again, how did the excitement of the actual series match up to the hype it was receiving in the moment in January as sort of the ceremonial kickoff to what was supposed to be a really fun 2023 season? I think where this is my final part of this rant, and I'm curious your thoughts. I don't know if it's a positive thing that the release of episodes 6 through 10 wasn't met with the same sort of excitement and anticipation as the first 5 episodes were for this series. Because looking back, and this is my question to you to disrupt your show outline before we even get started. 4 months later, time to reflect on the first 5 episodes. I don't know if they stuck in the sporting fans' conscience. Not the tennis fans' conscience, but the sporting fans' conscience. The way people were hoping via the anticipation. And it's a little disappointing that right off the bat, I think the first episode is better, and it doesn't receive the hype because, to your point, so much was happening when the first 5 episodes were released that they almost did get swept under the rug.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so you went a lot of different places there. I mean,
welcome back.
Yeah. Look, it wasn't going to have the same hype. Even the first 5 episodes would have needed to be killer, because when things aren't new anymore, they're not new anymore. New is exciting. Old is less exciting.
Fair.
So yes, there wasn't the mystery. What is this going to be like? Is this going to hit like Drive to Survive? Is this going to launch tennis up to crazy popularity suddenly? And no, that didn't happen. And what you say about the first 5 not being memorable is interesting. I think let's just get into it. I open Netflix, and it's the first thing on like my trailer head, like what to watch next.
The algorithm knows what you're up to. Like, come on, if Gill Gross isn't watching this, we f***ed up.
That's correct. That would be bad. But so Netflix knows, they knew. And it's this whole thing of basically Tsitsipas and Kyrgios and their contrasting views on Wimbledon. And, it sets up that 3rd round match. So immediately, that's the crown jewel of the episode. It's Kyrgios, or I'm not even going to say the episode, the season. Like, that's the season trailer. Now, obviously, that's going to come up right away. In fact, episode 6, the first episode of the 2nd batch. But what do you think of, what do you make of immediately highlighting, okay, back to Nick Kyrgios. This was what episode 1 was. And I guess of all of the first 5, I do feel like the one that stuck with most of the casuals was probably the Kyrgios episode. Even though I think a lot of the tennis people who dislike Kyrgios may have been actually like actively turned off by it. But ultimately, if you're casting as wide a net as you possibly can, I feel like Nick was the perfect angle to kind of jump into this next batch with.
Why episode 6, we'll get into the meat of it right away. Why it worked better than any other episode we've had thus far is for the first time in a real way, we had conflict. We did not have any conflict in the first 5 episodes. You had a lot of setting the scene, which, by the way, you have to do at the start of every show. And in episode 10, Gil, I won't get us too off track today, but in episode 10, we should have the conversation of should they have released all 10 episodes at the same time versus releasing the first 5, letting them sit, then releasing the second 5. Because I do wonder strategically if that might have been a blunder. That said, we didn't have to waste is the wrong word, but we didn't have to waste time with the exposition of here's Nick Kyrgios and what he represents. We didn't waste time with here's Steph Tsitsipas and what he represents. Yes, we got reiterations of what they had each gone through, what a character like Ons Jabeur and Aijla Tomljanovic, who were introduced in the first 5 episodes, just a reminder of who they are in the big picture of things. But the central crux of the episode was conflict. And it was Nick Kyrgios versus the institution. And then it was character on character in Kyrgios versus Tsitsipas. And we just hadn't had that in a tangible way in any episode before this one. And now that we've gotten it, it's just like, yes, this is the show. Let's find more of this.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. There was not a single instance where it's like, in the first 5, where it's, oh, these 2 individuals are playing each other. Yeah. They're very different. They don't like each other. Here's why they don't like each other. And it's very clear, like, they are philosophically very, very different kind of people. We got that in Kyrgios versus Tsitsipas. And also to your point, like, you're right. Every single character that was introduced in the first 5 was like, let's take 5 minutes now to be like, this was, I guess for Ons, it was somewhat relevant, but it's like, let's go back to like when they were a child and where they're from. And here's their mom and here's their dad. And it's like, I'm not really here for the, I don't know, biography of the players' childhoods.
No, just to add to this, Couscous was very cute. It's not the central theme, and it's not a conflict in a show. Taylor Fritz jumping while entertaining and landing funny is disappointing for a main character and a source of conflict internally, but not a conflict that draws you into continuing to watch the show unless you think Taylor Fritz is, we love Taylor Fritz here on this show, but unless you're just unequivocally attracted to the character of Fritz or some aspect of him jumping and injuring himself is not enough to get you into the show. Again, learning about Kyrgios is fascinating, but how do all of those demons and all of those internal conflicts manifest themselves into outward problems that he has to solve? We finally got that. Like, it wasn't foo-foo. It was, this is real. Again, Nadal in the tunnel versus Rude. That's one of the standout moments of the first 5 episodes because you feel the conflict. You feel the anticipation of 2 competitors stepping into the arena. You got that in this episode.
Yeah.
Finally.
Episode 5 was actually when we said that we got it for the first time.
Yeah.
But it was the Uncle Tony, Felix.
Sure.
This is weird. This is uncomfortable. There's something stomach turning about this situation. So we got conflict there. But this is the first time where it's actually about 2 competitors, an on-court battle.
Yeah, and you can pick a side. Like, there's some, like, you're not going to root for Uncle Tony. Like, it's just like, he makes a good argument arguing for his nephew. It's like, that's not a fun barroom discussion to have. I think all of us remember July 4th weekend 2022 of being the weekend where at some point you got a text of, yo, are you watching Tsitsipas Kyrgios right now? Because it's nuts. And like, they captured it. They got it. And it's a credit to the players, but it's a credit to the team being like, yo, we have something here. Let's not this up.
Numbers-wise, on YouTube, there was that post-match video is one of my most viewed of all time. Mm-hmm. And I started with just tennis analysis. I didn't get to the behavior stuff until like minute 20 because I was disgusted after that.
That's just match. Monday match analysis for you.
Well, exactly, right? We'll talk. Now, here's the thing. We're not going to get to do a post-mortem on that match in this podcast episode. We'll do that next time because they didn't finish the match in episode 6 of Breakpoint, which was fascinating. So let's kind of move this forward here. By the way, they opened up with some vibes from the first 5 episodes, which is normal, right? If you are watching Succession or Barry, okay, 2 shows that I've enjoyed very much recently.
The only 2 shows you've ever watched, but sure, carry on.
Get out of here, all right? Very, very topical show. They're just the 2 best shows right now. I'm sorry that I watched the 2 best shows from the last year. You have like in case you forgot, this is what's up. Okay, that's the very street way of saying it. But they tried to do this, and I would say the only moment that was recalled that was like, that gave you like the, oh yeah, that happened, that moment, was they literally took the business center back and forth. They just took it in full. Did you notice that?
Well, first of all, David Kane made this point in an article he wrote for tennis.com about Breakpoint, which is worth reading, on how you kind of don't need to do that as a show because it's already happened. This is a retrospective. Everyone knows how things end. And so I do like that they picked, because there really were only 5, and they were like, here are the 5 best scenes. Let's show them to you one more time. This is why this show is worth watching. And shout out to both Aijla and Berrettini when asked, like, hey, you guys broke up. We kind of made it a storyline. Can you give us, 3 to 6 sentences on why and where things are from there? And to their credit, they did. And those are the sort of plot points that, again, connect one episode to the next and just give the show a through line. And yes, I did notice that. I liked it. I thought we got exactly It wasn't overdrawn of we have to reintroduce everyone. It was just a reminder, this is where we left off with them.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, I don't mean to take the negative approach here. I was just like, oh wow,
No,
like
I agree.
There weren't a lot of moments where it's just like, hey, let's remind the viewers of that moment and this moment and that, and like that was the only one that actually hit me. But since you mentioned the Berrettini kind of follow-up, the Tomljanović Berrettini follow-up, first of all, I love that we've gotten to a point where, you know, we can call back on stuff from past episodes. Like that's what a show needs to be in order for a show to work. Look, respect to them, but let's not act like they spilled the tea here. They did not spill the tea, Gruskin. I mean, they gave the bare minimum.
But Chris Everett spilled the tea when she's like, you know why she's this good? Because she's single. And I was like, give me the tea.
We don't even know who broke up with who. Again, Matt, we don't, did they say?
No, it did seem very mutual. You're right.
They didn't say? Look, again, respect.
Yeah.
But better TV if you know. Anyway, let's go on.
Sorry. Last thing, I swear.
Okay.
I'll stop beating the drum afterwards. This gets me back to the point, and you just brought it up as the example. You know how you can lean on episodes 1 through 5 when watching 6 through 10? Wouldn't it have been nice to do that in the moment and just had the full through line and the full plot point? Or if you weren't ready with 6 and 10, should they have waited with 1 through 5? This is a theme, I think, throughout the course of the episodes we will be discussing. And I'm curious what people tuning into these episodes think, if they would have enjoyed this storyline better. Maybe in the binge era, this is just how us millennials feel, but all at once.
Okay. I don't really have a strong take on it right now, but maybe that'll change.
Yeah.
So we introduced Wimbledon. This is kind of an opportunity already to kind of portray the differing ideas of what Wimbledon is. They have Tsitsipas giving this very rosy, romantic description of the All England club, and then they just cut to Nick, and he's just like, "Yeah, I'm not going to conform." So good intro overall.
Oh my God. 6 out of 10 on the impression. Carry on.
I thought there was a moment immediately that highlighted one of the adjustments that we talked about, where it's like, there wasn't a lot of pushback to anything anyone said in the first 5 episodes. I noticed right away, Nick Kyrgios basically said like, yeah, if I can do it in singles, or if I can do it in doubles, I can do it in singles. And then they clearly asked Andy Roddick what he thought. And Andy was like, yeah, that's a stretch. And it is a stretch. Like, that's one of the most asinine things I've ever heard. You can't do it in singles if you can do it in doubles. Or like Cabal and Farah would win the US Open. So I just like that immediately. It's like, okay, we're doing a better job of actually checking these statements and getting a little bit of back and forth between the interviewers.
Why would I apologize? Why would I apologize? I mean, he made the mistake. Why would I apologize? Like, that's how you better Kyrgios impression. I need you to rate us in the comments, folks. You're absolutely right. And I do think, again, having some time to think about things, Roddick, Sharapova, and I can't believe these words are about to come out of my mouth, but Patrick Mouratoglou, or however you want to say it, they are very good at providing commentary of each of these players and offering candid thoughts. And I thought Mouratoglou in particular, in analyzing not just Nick, but Steph, and speaking on the impact of their emotions. Yeah, because I do think that is the overwhelming factor in a series where tennis hasn't been the superstar. It hasn't been serve, +1, forehand analysis. It's this technical thing that separates A from B, where it is talking more at a superficial level. And it is true. When his emotions get the best of him, that's when Steph gets sloppy. When he can channel them in the right way, he can be magical. I thought Mouratoglou painted that picture beautifully. To your point, Roddick's analysis on Kyrgios was exceptional. Sharapova speaking to the moment, the grandeur, the pageantry, and then the pressure associated with that. I thought the analysts were spot on in their analysis.
Muratoglu called Tsitsipas, and he should, by the way, because Stefanos has been to his academy, supports his academy. He is not an unbiased source here. But he said he's a model of professionalism.
I don't think that's untrue in terms of his off-court preparation and the way he goes about dedicating himself to his craft. And you heard Steph, sorry, that's a college tennis, different player. You heard Stefanos discuss those things
you can call him Steph.
In separating himself from Kyrgios, right? That was a point he highlighted in making the contrast. I didn't think anything was unfair. It was hyperbolic maybe, but not unfair.
That's fair. That's fair. I just think, I think if we did a poll right now, is Steph a model of professionalism on this video? I'm going 80% no on that.
But was he dating Badosa a year ago when this series was shot? Big difference.
Okay, so I thought that there wasn't a ton of forward momentum in the episode for maybe 20 minutes after the intro. But then we get into the tennis kind of starting, and we get Kyrgios versus Job, which was a first round. There is a ball abuse controversy, a lineswoman who goes to quote unquote snitch on Kyrgios' foul language. That match actually goes 5 sets. And I think Nick just says some things after the match that most players aren't willing to say. He said he played, first of all, he said he was playing like such shit, and he said he played one of the worst matches in 3 years. Worst matches he's played in 3 years and still won. There's also, he spit after match point, got fined $15,000 for that. We got some press conference drama.
Why should I apologize?
Exactly. And then after the press conference happened, the show did something that I thought it was hesitant to do in the first 5 episodes, which is highlight the social media buzz. I thought I love the intention. Like, good job, we're almost there, but not quite. Like, why are we doing anonymous Twitter eggs with like blurred out usernames? Like, these could be made up tweets for all we know. Like, can you just show, is this illegal? Are there laws I'm not aware of? I'm pretty sure
it's got to be identity related, maybe, or you need permission. But look, it's public.
I thought, and
blame Elon.
We don't need to get into a legal discussion here, but I was under the impression that let's just say me, if I tweet something, anybody can put that wherever the they want. Like, it's totally in the public. I tweeted it. That's it. So I feel like we can do better than like no anonymous, like, that doesn't do it. That just doesn't do it for me. But yeah, I'm glad that we're trying to incorporate the kind of temperature of the moment using social media.
It's a credit to the producers. It is partially a credit to Nick Kyrgios as well. They showed the conflict. They showed him, reporters, yelling at one another. It was after, I might be an episode ahead. Never mind. Season 7, after the season. Well, it's not a spoiler. Episode 7, after the Tsitsipas match, they get a clip of Kyrgios saying, "Oh, I'm looking forward to this press conference." And, again, they don't shy from, dare I say, questionable character and questionable actions and things that genuinely deserved the scorn and, dare I say, disapproval for many fans from Kyrgios. It's why he's so captivating. He's a polarizing talent. It's why, again, even in those moments, you are drawn to watching him as a fan because there is something magnetic about it. They dove into that. They embraced that fact, and they showed every aspect of it on court, in competition, how it manifests itself during a match, in the dynamic between he and his box, between he and the press afterwards, between he and social media afterwards. They just didn't shy from it. And as a fan, all you're asking for is candidness. And when in F1, I think about not the latest season, but the one prior to that, where Mercedes and Red Bull, comes down to the final race of the year, and just the genuine disdain Toto Wolff and Christian Horner have for one another, and they talk about it openly, and they show that on camera. They just embraced the open disdain. It wasn't necessarily Tsitsipas versus Kyrgios, but it was so many versus Kyrgios. And you just need conflict in a show, and this one had it.
I agree.
Yeah.
After the Jub match comes what I think is the most powerful.
Well, can I ask quickly you on the
Yeah.
Kyrgios thing? As a and this is an inside baseball tennis question. Are you fine with this being the representation of the sport? That this Kyrgios phenomenon has the gravity of a storyline of a full episode that it's appeared in this show?
It's the right move.
Okay. Why?
I asked the question early on, actually to start, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do we feel
we
about?
talked about it 1 through 5, but I think it's worth rehashing.
Yeah, but this again, like the mainstream and widespread interest that this Kyrgios Tsitsipas match generated at Wimbledon is worthy of this, because again, you just, whatever the widest number of people are interested in, that's what they should go with. And look, I get it. There's a lot of people who love this sport deeply who hate that this is what the show is focusing on. I respect their opinions, but this is a numbers game.
Yeah.
And this is Netflix. And there's no doubt that in this actually kind of somewhat conflict averse sport, okay, because we I think rightly criticized the first 5 episodes for just shying away from moments where they could have gone into it and didn't. But all things considered, there's also a lack of opportunity to actually get into these things, because there's less conflict in tennis than in some other sports interpersonally, especially publicly. So you have to take it where it exists, and it existed here. And look, how about this? You can't say anything about, well, it's not relevant to Wimbledon, because no, like, the guy made the final. Nick made the final. So you can't say that they are stooping so low as to just, cherry pick from the world number 50 who's going to lose in the 3rd round just because he throws tantrums. That's inaccurate. Like, this guy is a very relevant contender at this time.
Yeah. Well said.
All right. I was saying, after the Jub match comes probably the most rawest, emotional sequence in the show, where Nick gets into 2019, calls it the lowest point of his career. He says, I hated the kind of person I was. I was drinking. I was abusing drugs. I lost all the relationships in my life. One of the damning details that he revealed is that his whole arm was covered in scars. And that's why he was wearing that kind of basketball style shooting sleeve that I think we all assumed that Nick was wearing because he loves basketball, and that he was trying to, look like Jason Tatum or something. But really, there was a much, darker reason behind that. I just think that what makes any sports documentary or sports nonfiction compelling is when the athletes can tear down those walls and be 100% vulnerable. For Nick to do that was really great. And also, I'm happy that he's in a place where he can look back at that, talk about that honestly, and hopefully that, it brings a lot of relief and therapy to him.
Yeah, you used the exact word honesty, and to hear it not just from him, but from his sister, from his dad, from Horst, his manager as well. It felt very real, and anyone who followed the sport from afar, it was very clear in 2019 something was wrong with Nick Kyrgios, and to learn these details all these years later, this is what a show like this is supposed to be a vessel for, to tell these stories, to reveal these details that we wouldn't otherwise know. And, again, it speaks to why you can see how important it is to have the right environment around you as an athlete, or how quickly things can spiral, and how important it is for Nick and his parents and Horst, again, and his girlfriend and the entire team to just, for them, if they're not in the right mindset, Nick cannot have success on court. And you learn why that's the case throughout this episode, which is, again, when this show is working at its best.
Yeah. So ultimately, he ends up checking into a psych ward in the UK in 2019. There's also this amazing scene painted where his father woke up by his bedside crying, and that was kind of the turning point. And then Horst got into kind of how his job is to minimize stress. It's just to kind of take away all of the factors that could kind of put Nick back in that place.
And
so
not
I thought
to
that
make
was
light
real
of
good
that,
insight.
though, I agree. Horse, though, adds to the stress level in the kitchen because that man's trying to do too much. Like, Mr. Kyrgios is like, I got it. And Horse is like, no, I should cut the onions. Right? He's like, dude, I got the onions. Just, like, sit down and be ready to eat.
Yeah, absolutely.
We all know that
AirPods
guy.
in it all.
Yeah.
All right, transition to Aijla. We bring back Aijla Tomljanovic, who was featured in episode 2 earlier in the season. They get right away into the Matteo breakup. We already talked about that. But then really, I think what comes in is she's having a horrible season, or a bad season at least. Maybe horrible is a little bit hyperbolic. And as a result, Racquets, her father, has come to the rescue. Racquets is here.
He's the winner of the episode. I mean, the best character we've been introduced to maybe thus far, and there have been a lot of fun ones, but he's a goofball. He's just, again, a breath of fresh air. And for those who aren't as familiar with typical tennis relationships, often there is a particular parent who is the driving inspiration behind the success, whether it's a father or a mother. In many different cases, it just depends. And in Aijla's case, it is Racquets, who has been working with her throughout the course of her career, and clearly with things not just career-wise not where she wanted to be, but after a breakup, a father wants to be there for his daughter. And you can see, again, her tolerance and sometimes intolerance of his character and just his goofiness. It's the sort of comic relief in what was otherwise at times a very serious, again, it was very serious and hard-pressed episode. He was the comic relief you need, and we'll get to best quotes and best scenes, but, I mean, Racquets is a part of many of them in this episode.
Yeah, so now you have Aijla actually doing a good amount.
And if I may, just to get to the center theme, because it's not just Racquets, and I'm curious your thought as well, to get to the importance of the team and them emphasizing that. Chrissy Everett has a major cameo, and they discuss her relationship with Tomljanović as well and its importance. And it was interesting how their focus on that. Did you notice that as well?
Yeah, and I've noticed it throughout the series. It's one of the best things about this is because these tennis players have these support groups, and the knowledge out there on who they are is horrible. It's horrific. And I mean, if you're in our position and you're broadcasting matches, you're constantly reminded of that. Oh wow, this guy, like Horse. Man, before the series, I didn't know who the guy was. Yeah. That's bad because he's a major part of a central figure in the sport. But hey, nobody's telling us who these guys are really. So that's been a really good feature. And then for Racquets to come in, and you're right, he immediately says, like, it's not just that he's a goofball, so he's going to be a comedian. Like, that's also his role to Aijla is, look, Ayla's taking herself way too seriously. We got to relax her and loosen her up. So I'm going to be the class clown here, and it's going to help her win tennis matches. Yeah. And that's what happened. And then there was this nice scene where, like, he didn't book a hotel past the first week. Tomljanović won her third round match, and he was just like, she's going to be pissed. And she was. And she was so mad.
I just love it. She's like, Dad, I just don't want to do this right now. Like, please tell me you're kidding, because I've been there. And shout out to my father. I had a streak of tournaments. I was 16 years old. I was a little chubbier when I was younger, and I kind of hit puberty 14, 15. And, I still kind of had the figuring out how to use my body at that point. But 16, it kind of all clicked, and I just had this streak of like 4 weeks consecutively of really good tournaments. And I remember the third week was the highest level one I played, and I made it to the final weekend in the back draw. And my dad goes, look, like, Alex, I got to be honest with you. I was expecting to be back at work by now. I did not book a hotel because, to be honest, you didn't think you were going to get this far either. Like, what do you want to do here? And I was like, well, what do you mean, what do I want to do? I was like, Dad, like, I got to play a match. Like, this is a you thing. This is not a me thing. And obviously, shout out to one of my buddies who was like, oh, just stay with us, because my dad had to go back for work. And it ended up working out just fine. It wasn't an issue. But, like, this is a rite of passage in tennis. And I just thought It was wonderful to see, even at that level. It's like sometimes that'll happen to a dad where it's like, look, like, can't we just be honest with each other here as a joke? Like, did you think you were going to get this far? Because this is one of those, we'll figure it out when we get there. I love that he goes, I was trying to save you money, which, by the way, is exactly what my dad would say as well. It's like, I get both sides of the argument. It's adorable.
It's also true. Like, you don't get refunded on these hotels that these players booked. And it's good insight. It's good insight for people who don't think about this stuff. And honestly, why would you think about this stuff? Like the hotel thing is a real thing. And this was awesome. These were the kinds of moments behind the scenes that,
I was dying.
That we want. It's like, this is the advantage of Netflix having their cameras in areas where media is not allowed to have their cameras. Like, let's get these moments. Love it. Awesome. However, I do have some critiques for building up the Cornet Tomljanović match, which, like,
yes, I agree.
Look, she made the quarterfinals of Wimbledon in 2021.
I never thought it was going to be possible, even though I did it last year. It's
like, what the hell?
It's also like you were playing Alizé Cornet, not Iga Swiatek. Like, Cornet's a veteran, but she's not even top 25 in the world, let alone, top 10 or top 5. Like, no, that's a match you absolutely had a shot at winning. And I agree with you. That framing was, again, that's the sort of thing tennis fans will be like, come on now. At the same time, the mental hurdle for Aijla Tomljanovic was extraordinarily real.
Sure. And look, It might have been because she said these things herself. It's not like the producers of Netflix made this up, but Aijla was like, I've never been so emotional after a match. And she was emotional after the match, but like, it wasn't explained why. And frankly, I was a little bit confused why. I think it was just because she was having such a tough year. Yeah. But if that was the reason, you got to spell it out because look, like, she made the quarters, which for some players would be especially at, I think she was 29 years old at the time. If you don't make the quarterfinals until you're 29, like, that is a really big deal, But like, when you did it last year, it's just not as big a deal as maybe they made it out to be. So here's the thing with the Tomljanović storyline from like a tennis standpoint strictly. And I thought that the storyline with her father and stuff was much more rewarding than maybe it could have been. I actually think it punched above its weight. At the same time, like, you look at the people involved in this, Aijla is interestingly a peg down from pretty much all of them. And I thought overall it was a positive thing, like how much they were able to get out of her. But the tennis part of it does fall a little bit flat, I guess, until the US Open. And then they'll get more, reward, on-court reward out of Tomljanovic's participation in season 1 of Breakpoint.
Yeah, I have 2 points off of this, and I'll be brief. Point A is, I think this show has continued to struggle, and lol, but we talked about this with Brian Koppelman. They've struggled to show the tennis. They've struggled to make the points themselves.
Can we save this?
Themselves. No, exactly.
I agree.
That's why it's a brief one, because I just think fundamentally that struggle is why part B, it's important to have a good storyline, because right now you're selling stories. You're not selling tennis. And I think the single most captivating element of the Tomljanović storyline to both tennis fans and non-traditional tennis fans alike, you want to know what the standard top 100, because we can't get to what the standard pro career looks like. We're not at, go watch the Challengers trailer, I suppose, for that. But yeah, not actually. But you need, what is like the replacement level, the Trevor Ariza of pro tennis look like? And it's like, that's Tomljanović, where sometimes, and for the majority of the year, you're just like, what's going on here? But on the right week, with the right draw, magic happens. And to be alongside for that magic is the most special thing to show, because you can't fake those emotions. And we get that from Tomljanović. And dare I just say, you get the everyman, the everywoman story in the top 100 in tennis through her. And she's the right vessel for it.
Right. But they're not, I don't think they're building that up.
Fair.
And I agree with you. So in fact, this reminds me of a moment. Sure. I guess so. We'll do it. We'll do it. There was a moment where she's playing on like a tiny, tiny court.
Yeah, yep. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep,
They're not highlighting that. Why
yep.
not? Like, the average tennis fan should understand what a major tournament looks like, where you have 3 really big stadiums, another 3 pretty big, like a fair amount of fans, and then the rest is like, oh, there's like 4 rows. There's 4 rows of stands, and that's it. And that is actually really interesting about the sport. And I think one of the best things about going to see tennis live is that you can go to a tiny court and sit courtside where it would cost you, I don't know, on center court at Wimbledon, it would cost you 15 grand.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's like, I even think they put an effect in the crowd. When she won the match point, it sounded like this big stadium roared. And I was just like, yeah, that's fake. It didn't sound like that.
Yeah. I think if they do that, though, then you have to get into, well, who's playing on court 22? And it's like, well, it's Etcheverry versus Yari.
The person you're in the dock, Aijla Tomljanovic, is playing on court 22.
I guess I'm less worried about those details. I see your point. I'm just a little less worried about those sorts of things than finding the right storylines.
Sure. And it's not that big a deal. I wasn't even going to bring it up.
You're right. Bring up what you got to bring up, my friend.
That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. After Tomljanovic wins and makes the quarterfinals, we go back to Kyrgios Tsitsipas. The round 3 matchup is set, and we'll end the podcast on this topic before we get into like the match beginning. Setting up the match, they've kind of been hinting at this contrast between Nick's personality and Steph's personality the entire time. But I thought we got a quote from Tsitsipas that is worthy of scrutiny in the lead up. First of all, Tsitsipas says he's considered the favorite because of his ranking. Real quick, is that true? Do you remember what the odds were for that match? I feel like he wasn't the favorite.
I think he was, though, because he had won the title the week before on the grass courts, and Kyrgios was a little iffier.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Just was wondering if you remember that. Nick says he's feared, he wants to be feared. It goes back to Tsitsipas now. And he says that Nick takes an NBA basketball approach to tennis, describes that approach as, quote, uneducated, says tennis is a gentleman's sport, and, quote, this is not basketball. I don't like the quote. I hate the quote, actually. I disagree with it in a lot of ways, and I think it can be damaging in certain ways. I'll say this. If you are, first let's kind of parse this. He's saying that Nick's attitude reminds him of an attitude in a league that is about 70% black, calls that attitude uneducated, and then says tennis, which is about over 70% white, is a gentleman's sport, unlike that other sport, which is not educated. So there's a lot there that is a little bit uncomfy. And I know it got tweeted out before the episode came out. And I kind of had a thing where I was like, all right, this quote, it looks pretty bad, but let's see what happens in context. Let's just see how this kind of hits the ear in the middle of the documentary. And I don't think it got much better. What say you?
I agree. The racial connotations of the quote are unacceptable. And particularly in an episode where Kyrgios earlier expresses how he was treated for the color of his skin earlier in life and the way that he looked. And again, there are so many different words that could have been used that, even if critical, would have been fair. If instead of uneducated, you say the unprofessional way, I don't think that would be criticized nearly as much. If you want to contrast yourself in your professionalism, your dedication to your craft, and call Kyrgios a much more casual approach as opposed to, again, uneducated or the basketball style of things where, again, it's more about himself and I think that's what Steph goes on to convey, is Nick's the center of the show, and certainly as they talk through the dynamic of the match, and then in the next episode they'll go into the post-match press conference, Stefanos continues to convey those sorts of things. It's the connotation of the sport. It's the use of the term uneducated, and in contrast to that, to what defines educated tennis? What defines this criteria of gentlemanness that is a standard that has to be up to Stefanos Tsitsipas's liking, even if the ethos of the quote, again, it was terrible word selection. There's no defending the quote. And I do think, not that quote, but again, later on in the episode, there are things Stefanos says in characterizing Nick's tennis that are not unfair. That quote was not only unfair, it was unacceptable.
Right. I mean, I think it's important to note that, like, first of all, Nick Kyrgios would say, yeah, I idolize these NBA players. I want to be like them. Francis Tiafoe gave an interview with The Uninterrupted, and he said, I'm trying to bring hoops culture to tennis. To frame that as...
But it's not the basketball. It's the basketball with the uneducated.
With the uneducated, yes.
Yes.
So here's why it's bad, right? Yes. Because we can throw labels on it all we want, not even, and those labels might be right. But at the end of the day, I think here's the crux of why what he said is bad. It's because if you are a young boy who is interested in tennis and wants to bring a certain NBA culture to tennis, and you think that's cool and that's what you want, okay? And you idolize NBA players and you idolize tennis players, and you want to have fun with the sport in certain ways, and maybe you like how Nick plays. When you have people saying that is not what the sport is supposed to be and that is unwelcome in the sport, you are turning away and gatekeeping what the sport is supposed to be about.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I know we have a running bit of trying to make these episodes longer than the actual episodes themselves, and I promise I'll be short here, but it's just about unpacking what does he mean by NBA culture. It means, again, flair. It means spirit. It means individualism. It means not being afraid to embrace magic that you produce on the court in a way that when he says gentlemanliness, you think of the class associated with a Roger Federer who could hit 17 winners in a row. You might get the same subtle fist pump, a wipe of his face of the towel, and it's on to the next point. That has been the traditional association, especially with a place like Wimbledon where you still have to wear all white clothing at the facility. Obviously a strong contrast to Nick Kyrgios, who will walk off court wearing the black hat from some matches, which is just not something you see very frequently at Wimbledon. It's a rejection of that. It's a rejection of, again, bringing any sort of different into the tennis space, and whether that difference is manifested in a personality trait or, again, given the racial connotations of basketball in this instance, a racial sense. It's just you don't want any of those associations, and unfortunately for Stefanos Tsitsipas, there's just it's very difficult to construe that quote, even if it was not his intent. It's hard to construe that quote in any other way.
Sure, and I'm sure it wasn't his intent. Yeah. But yeah, I like that you kind of defined, okay, like what is that NBA kind of approach, right? But you're right, stuff like trash talk, showmanship, exactly. Gamesmanship, even, which is a lot about kind of what the match ends up being about. Now, this episode, it ends on a cliffhanger. That's a new one. Series had never done that before.
Loved that. Because I looked up when they were getting to the seats. I was like, there's only 3 minutes left in this episode. What are they doing? And then they were like, next to be continued. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
I was like, you have me. And the best is they showed you enough of the conflict and what you're getting into. Like, hey, this got real. Like, let's show this. And, I mean, I don't want to say to Tsitsipas's credit, but to Tsitsipas's credit, he was candid. He said exactly what was on his mind. And, you know, again, Tsitsipas, there's a quote he talked about, I think it was in this episode, I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. I was really focused on doing what I was doing, and I was a little bit more individual and on my own. And it's just kind of like, hey, That's Nick Kyrgios. That's the story we just learned about in this episode. And in reality, these are two people who may think about things diametrically differently, but are two very much their own characters on their own islands, living in their own world. These two talents who you just have a million questions about, which is, again, what makes the contrast and the conflict between them on court so fascinating. You understand every aspect of why that conflict is fascinating. And full circle, final sentence, that's what makes this episode the best of the series thus far.
This has been episode 6, Belonging, the Breakpoint Show, available on the Cracked Racquets network of podcasts and Gill Gross YouTube. As always, see ya for episode 7. We will release every other day from now on.